Hey guys, it's a little cold here this afternoon up here in the garage doing some tackle prep, trying to get all my stuff ready and back in my boat from the last couple tournaments. Kyle and I went crappie fishing this past weekend. Didn't turn out the way we wanted it to be. However, it's good to be on the water. But I'm going to start a new series over the next few days talking about the rods that I have, why I have them, and what rods I use for each technique. One of the biggest things for me as a beginning angler was trying to figure out what rods I needed to buy initially and not have too many. Well, I'm at that point where I have too many, but it's just one of those, I choose to have this many. You don't really need to have this many rods in your boat or, in your arsenal at that total anyway. But we're going to look over the next few videos about what I have and why I have them and, what technique specific rods I have. Maybe it'll help you make a better decision about what to buy if you guys are just now getting into the bass fishing or fishing world altogether. So we're going to start with the crankbait series and what rods I use for crankbaiting. I do have some other crankbait rods in my boat, but I don't use them for crankbait specific techniques. I have crankbait rods that I have for topwater, and we'll get into that in the topwater series. So going to start with small to medium diver crankbaits. This is going to be something that is going to be very this rod right here, in my opinion, has a lot of uses in my boat. From throwing something like this, this is a Spro Little John type R50, all the way up to like a 3XD or something. I feel like you can get away with it on this rod. This is a Loomis 866C Deep Flex. The C is casting, CBR stands for crankbait rod. If you're just now into the world of fishing rods, and most of the time Loomis is the hardest one to actually understand what it is. It's normally 3 numbers, a letter, and then some other 3-letter combination. The first 2 numbers in the series, for example, this was 866C, so 86 is the number of inches that this rod is long. So 84 inches would be 7 foot. This is a 7.2. And then the 6, the third 6 here, 866, is the power of this rod. Now, don't take into consideration that a 6 power in a crankbait rod is the same as a 6 power in a jig worm rod or a JWR. That is absolutely not the case. So again, this is a CBR crankbait rod, and I don't know if you guys can see it here, you probably can. This is a DF, which stands for deep flex. What that means is the parabolic bend of this rod comes farther down towards the handle before it actually stops. It actually has a lot more bend in it than most any other crankbait that you're going to have. This rod, again, I'm throwing anything from very small square bills like a 1.0, 1.5, 2.5, something like that. I throw a ton of these baits right here, which again is a Little John Type R50. And I throw all the way up to a 5XD on this rod. And you may be thinking, it looks a little spindly. It is. It's fairly small rod. It's smaller than my pinky. That deep flex gives it a lot more parabolic bend, which allows me to set the hook more gingerly, if you will, on a big bass once they load up on the crankbait. The thing about a crankbait is that the reason you're going to want that crankbait rod or that parabolic bend is when you're usually reeling or ripping this thing. For example, this is a 7.4 to 1 gear ratio. This is a Corrado 70, and I'll talk about why I have the 70 on here in just a second. But if you talk about reeling this thing, with a 7.4 to 1 gear ratio, you're actually ripping this bait. So when you have a fish, a lot of times they're chasing it and they're going to eat it, but sometimes they pass by and eat it too. And if you have a really stiff rod, something that doesn't have that parabolic bend in it, you're actually going to cause a couple of things to happen. One, you're going to miss the fish because the reaction of you setting the hook when you feel that fish is going to rip it out of the fish's mouth. 2, you're actually literally going to rip the bait from the fish's mouth, tearing the lips or whatever. Or 3rd, you're going to break your line because you don't have that shock absorbing factor with the rod. Now, the reason I chose this rod as opposed to something else, a lot of people ask me why I don't fish NRX Plus rods for all of rods in my boat. I have a lot of NRX Plus. But I'll be the first to tell you, if it's not a bottom contact rod, something like a spinning rod or something like a jig worm rod or something like that, I do not spend the extra money on the NRX Plus. I don't feel like that you get the benefit of having that extra sensitivity on a moving bait. I just don't. So I normally spend my money on these Loomis IMX Pro to get a technique specific rod. The handle on this rod is fairly long. You're talking probably 10 inches long or so. And I have this paired up with a Corrado 70. And you may be thinking 70 is a really small reel. Like I can palm this thing, it doesn't hold that much line. I'm using 12-pound Sunline FC Sniper on this rig. So I'm not planning on casting this thing a mile, right? You can't cast these baits very far anyway. They're just light. So this 70 holds plenty of line for me to throw this thing, as well as keeping the bait in the strike zone longer, because I can make more casts and things with this reel. It's a lot lighter. You can actually fish this thing all day, and it's not going to cause you any kind of like pain or grief over the day. You can fish this thing all day. I really like the 70 series. The handles of it fit perfectly. You can palm the reel, because you're gonna be making a lot of casts with the crankbait rods, guys. That's just the way it is. So anything that you can do to keep the rod lighter in the end is going to be definitely that. So my very shallow rod to medium diver is going to be this G Loomis IMX Pro 866C CBRDF. And I forgot to mention what that first C is in this. 866, so 86 inches, 6 power. C stands for casting. If it was a spinning rod, it would be an S. The CBR stands for crankbait rod, and then the DF in this rod model stands for deep flex, which means this rod bends way down the blank, way more than it would in a normal crankbait rod. So let's look at my kind of a medium diver as far as what I'm going to be throwing from that 3 to 5 XD range. All right, so my medium diver crankbait rod is actually a glass poison adrena. This is make sure I get this right so you know, it's a 172 medium heavy glass. I throw a ton of different technique specific stuff on this rod, but I find myself throwing deeper diving crankbaits on it more often than not. This is a great swim bait rod. You can even throw smaller crankbaits like I was just showing you on that 866. But I've set this up for my medium diver. And again, this is at 3XD to 5XD range. I have a 5XD tied on here right now. I was actually catching some fish down in Del Hollow a couple weeks ago. Fishing in 30 foot of water, catching fish in 15 to 18 with this actually setup right here. So 172 heavy, this is a medium heavy glass. So this is a glass composite rod, which is going to give you more of a moderate action. It's not going to be a super fast action like you see on the JWRs or anything like that. It's going to give you a more parabolic bend, as well as that glass composite gives you a little bit more forgiving hook set on it. It's going to, again, feel more like a crankbait style rod. Again, more parabolic bend, parabolic meaning that it's a bending at the same rate. It's not like bending at an angle. It has a really nice taper to the whole bend. I love this rod for the medium diving crankbaits because, again, the length is perfect. Again, it's a 7.2, just like the other one. I love the 7.2 to higher powered stuff as far as lengthwise, and I'll show you one of my longest rods I have in just a second. But this rod fits perfectly in that mid diving range there, looking at that 3XD to 5XD range. This is an awesome lipless crankbait rod as well. Got that glass composite and several other things. Running on this is going to be a Shimano Corrado DC when in a 150 HD. That's a 7.4 to 1 gear ratio, similar to the Corrado that I just showed you. This thing holds a lot more line. The reason I chose to throw this DC on this reel is the fact that these crankbaits are a little more heavy. A lot of times I'm throwing these things in wind and things like this, and this DC is a game changer when you're actually trying to get to cast things into the wind and make sure that you can keep that bird's nest and backlash from happening, especially if you're a new angler. So this rod, again, still running the 12-pound Sunline FC Sniper. I really like the Sniper fluorocarbon with my crankbaits. One thing to consider is when you're using fluorocarbon, your baits dive a little deeper than they're actually shown on the package, maybe a half a foot to even a foot deeper, so keep that in mind. Corrado DC is an awesome reel for any kind of crankbait situation. This is a 7.4 to 1 gear ratio on the 172 medium heavy glass poison adrena. Amazing for medium range diving crankbaits such as the 3 or 5 XD. So let's look at my really deep diving crankbait setup. And right now I've been throwing a lot of swim baits and stuff, and this rod that I'm going to show you right here has a ton of different uses in my boat. But we're going to look at the biggest crankbait rod that I have in my boat for deep diving crankbaits. So you're looking for something to throw really big baits a really long ways, and that rod is right here again. So you guys heard me talk about the IMX Pro series. The reason I buy these rods instead of NRX Plus or even higher end stuff is the fact that I feel like that you're not getting any advantage by spending that extra money on the IRM or the NRX Plus rods when it's not a bottom contact rod. So this is it's actually a Shimano reel, but this is a G Loomis IMX Pro 906C CBR. So this is 90 inches with a 6 power. Now, again, this is a 6 power, and the other one that I showed you is a 6 power. And let's take a look at the differences between the size of these rod blanks just for a second. I want you to understand that not all rod blanks that are 6 power are the same. You can see that there is a substantial difference in size compared to this one. From this one to this one, it's almost double as big. And again, so keep that in mind. The power rating on a Crankbait series rod is a little different than most rods. So this is a 906C CBR. So this is 90 inches, 6 power crankbait rod. This is a 7-foot 6-inch rod, really large rod. You see that I have one of the new Berkley call shads on here. That's what I use to throw these big baits on right now. I don't have a big bait rod. This is probably not the best rig for this swim bait. This rod, even though it's a 6 power and it's 7.5 foot, it feels a little underpowered compared to a 6 power that you would think on a jig worm rod. It's definitely way different. This is paired up with a Corrado K series, and this is just the regular 6 gear ratio, 6.2 to 1 Corrado K200. I like it because it holds a lot of line. You can cast this thing a mile. A lot of times you're throwing big crankbaits on this thing. I'm throwing the swim bait on here. You're going to be getting this thing way out into the wind. You're going to be ripping this thing out there and trying to get as much distance as you can. One of the things that makes this rod a little bit more spectacular is this extra long handle that you can use for leverage and literally rip this thing out in there. I'm talking about making some extremely long casts. This thing is one of my favorite lipless crankbait rods on the absolute planet, man. I'll tell you what, I told you guys you could throw a lipless on that 7.2 medium heavy glass Adrena, but I'm telling you, this one right here is not to be overlooked. I could even throw, 4XD, 5XD, something like a 6XD, something that's diving 15 to 18 to 25 foot crankbait. That's going to be on this 906C CBR. Really long handle, allows you to lock that thing in under your arm and get a lot of leverage, because you guys know if you guys throwing big crankbaits for an extended period of time, I promise you these things will make you tired if you're not using the correct setup. I have a Sunline Assassin. This is actually, I believe, 16-pound test. Don't quote me on that. Somewhere in there, 15, 16-pound test, because I'm throwing these deeper diving crankbaits. They're going to have a lot more weight to them and stuff. But one of the things that I like to do, the reason I have a slower gear ratio reel on this is because I find that fish bite bigger crankbaits when they're moving slower. I have no reason why, and I'm not a fish biologist by any means, but I know that I get bit a lot more often if I'm throwing a big crankbait, slower gear ratio, as opposed to ripping that thing. So this is my big crankbait rod. I have one more that's kind of in between. I'm going to show you guys that before we get off here. But this is the IMX Pro G Loomis 906C CBR. Really big crankbaits, 6XD, something like a dredger that's going 20 plus feet deep. Definitely what I'm looking at right here, 906C CBR. And last but not least, this is kind of in that same range as the first crankbait rod that I showed you, which was the E66C CBR Deep Flex IMX Pro. And it's the fourth and last crankbait rod that I have in my boat that I actually use for crankbaiting. And this is an X-Pride 7-foot medium glass. You can see there, this is an X-Pride B, 7-foot medium glass. That MGB stands for medium glass, B stands for X-Pride B. This is the B series, which was the newer version of X-Prides that came out. I do have the 70 on this as well. Same deal, 7.4 to 1 gear ratio. I wish they made the 70 series in a 7 or 6 gear ratio. They just don't. It's 7 and 8 only. So Shimano, if you're out there listening, I would appreciate if you guys would bring out this 70 in something like this 70 series in a 6 gear ratio. Would be awesome. You see that I have this thing paired up with a 3/8 ounce head, and I'm throwing a big old giant crankbait on there. Probably not the best bait for this, or the best rod for this, but I was in a bind the other day. I didn't take very many rods with me on a excursion with a buddy of mine in his boat, so I just rigged this up, worked out really well. The reason I like this rod is the fact that this rod is budget friendly. It's not super over the top. The reel handle is amazing. The 70 series Corrado is amazing on here. But I like the way that this thing loads up when it's actually, when I'm catching fish on this. If you guys want to go back and watch me catch a ton of fish on a crankbait on this actual rod, go back and check out the Chasing Browns trophies from this year, this past spring in April when me and Kyle went fishing. We caught close to 200 smallmouth and 3As, and I would say 85% of the fish that I caught were actually on this setup. This is a high-speed gear ratio. It's not an 8, but it's 7.4 to 1 gear ratio. Do have that Sunline FC Sniper on here. Going to be looking at 12-pound test on here. And 70 series is great for this thing. Glass composite allows you to have a really nice parabolic bend, and also make sure you're not ripping that fish or that bait out of the fish's mouth. I really also like this carbon handle that comes on the new X-Pride Bs, similar to what you see on the Poison Adrena. And you guys know how I feel about those rods. They're amazing. If you guys are looking to get into the world of crankbaiting for any style, those are my 4 rods that I would recommend right off the rip. Again, that is the IMX Pro 866C CBR Deep Flex. That's for small to medium diving crankbaits. You can use that exactly for this too. This is a 7-foot medium glass and X-Pride B. The next step up would be my medium diving crankbait, which is going to be that 172 medium heavy glass Poison Adrena. An amazing rod for that. I do have that paired with a Corrado DC. I would recommend, Corrado DCs if you do have the ability to buy them, especially guys, if you're just now getting into the world of bass fishing. It's going to save you some headaches and some time, I promise you. And then my last but not least, my bigger style crankbait rod is going to be the IMX Pro 906C CBR, which is a crankbait rod. It's a 7-foot 5-inch rod, which has a ton of handle, a lot of leverage power, and allows you to get those big baits down there to those big fish and not be drained at the end of the day. So guys, if this video helped you out, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you would, tell your friends about this channel. I'm trying to get to 5,000 subscribers, and I cannot do it without people just like you. So you guys know the routine. If you guys can, get out there and lean on them. We'll see you next time on Another Line.